Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're joining us from. We are worldwide for our webinar today, How to Connect Purpose to Your Project, presented by Tom Richard from Rising Terrain LLC. I'm Eileen Goldberg. I'll be your moderator today. There's a couple of housekeepings I'd like to go over before we get started. The first is this is being recorded, and a copy of the recording and the slide deck will be sent to all registrants by close of business today. The second is you'll notice a long skinny box on the right-hand side of your screen. That's the control panel. There's a red arrow to the left of that box. That's the minimization and maximization arrow. Please feel free to use that throughout the presentation so you can view the presentation more closely. At the bottom of your control panel, you'll see the questions box. Please put any questions you have in that box. They'll be answered at the end of the presentation. If they reference a particular slide or topic, please add that to your question so we can answer your question appropriately. We'll be doing a quick plus delta at the end of the presentation as well. For those of you who are not familiar with the term, pluses are things you thought added value to the presentation, and deltas are things you think we should change to add more value to the presentation. In the spirit of continuous improvement, we absolutely want to make our webinars more of what you'd like to hear. So be thinking about those plus deltas and give us that feedback at the end of the presentation. This is also going to be kind of an interactive presentation. There will be several questions throughout the webinar that we're going to ask you to think about and answer. So as you're thinking about those, if you could put those answers in the questions box, we'll be able to see those and read those out for everybody. So just a quick recap, this is being recorded. A copy of the recording and the slide deck will be sent to all registrants by close of business today. You see the red minimization and maximization arrow and the questions box where you can put your questions, your plus deltas, and any answers to questions that Tom asks. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Tom. Thanks, Tom.
Great, thank you, Eileen, and thank you for everybody for participating in this. It's great to talk about this project and this part of connecting purpose to your project. And just to set some context as we begin, these are performance families that I work with teams, and this is the way I describe the way some of the practices in lean construction, lean design that we implement, just a way of classifying them and organizing them. And this connection of purpose to your project falls under that leadership set of performance practices. And it's important to think about our leadership practices as a core part of what we do on lean projects. And attaching and understanding our purpose for work is really a key part of this. And so really want to sort of set this in terms of a little bit of history. This idea of connecting purpose to projects is not new, and I'm going to follow a certain stream of history just to show that this has really informed a lot of the work in lean as well. And so to start that off, I'll show this slide that was created by John Shook. He was the first American manager at a Toyota factory. He later became the head of the Lean Enterprise Institute. Very thoughtful person in terms of what is lean and what is the history of lean and what informed specifically the Toyota production system. So if you take a look at this slide, I mean, there are a lot of influences in terms of the Toyota production system. I'm going to pick a few people that were, their names are on this slide, and just sort of trace through this line of history, if you will, and how people thought about the importance of purpose and related to that, service to their work. So if I had to subtitle this presentation of how to connect purpose to your project, we'll talk about Buddha, Samuel, Sakichi, Ed, and you. And so we'll talk briefly about those first four, and then we'll go into what you can do on your projects as you work with your teammates. So when we're talking about Buddha, we're really talking about the influence that he had on some of the things that were forming in the mind of Sakichi Toyota and others that were influential in thinking about the early days of what we call lean. They never used that term, but what we call lean in Toyota. And in Japan, Buddhism spread there. But starting with the idea of Buddha, some people refer to it as a religion, but really it's helpful in this context to think about it as a philosophy. And for those that are maybe a little bit unfamiliar, Buddhism started with the teachings that were in India, northern India, but then they spread throughout Asia, particularly east through China and Japan. And so by the time we're looking at Japan in the 6th century, a lot of Buddhists and Japanese belong to different types of schools. And one of the schools was called the Nichiren-shu, or the school of Nichiren. It was established, and so these different schools had different types of philosophies that they promoted for the people that followed them. And what was unique about Nichiren's teaching was really he wanted to think about the philosophy as being something that people practice. It wasn't just something that was a belief system, but it was important to practice these teachings and these beliefs that they had. And the purpose of these teachings was really to create, in his view, world peace. It permit a nation to be strong and contribute in a sense of service to world peace. And so one of the philosophies that came out of this school was called Hotoko, and it spread through parts of Japan, and it was really designed to be a practical type of philosophy that addressed the economy. It addressed the terms of integrity and in terms of people's morality. And the real focus was, how do we as people contribute to society? And that was really our purpose as people in the view of this school and this thinking, that we have to find ways to contribute to society, that we're not focused on our private interests. If we focus on contributing to society, then these benefits do eventually return to us as individuals. But the focus has to be first on how we serve others, and then we benefit in turn. So that foundation was there and prevalent in parts of Japan, and was something that informed the Toyota family. So next I'll move to Samuel. So Samuel is Samuel Smiles, and he's a very different part of the world. Was from England, and he's best known for publishing a book called Self-Help. So Self-Help, this is in the middle of the 19th century, and is really focused on the importance of the individual working hard, being focused in their work. And in the book, it talks using examples of many different people, for the most part English people, and talking about how through their hard work and their high character and their high standards of morals and their willingness to serve others, that they were successful. And so there was this focus on the development of the internal self, if you will, sort of self-development. And from that, you would have happiness. You would be able to really enjoy life. But part of this was also about spreading this happiness, this enjoyment of life to others. As you read through the book, you have a sense that we as individuals have a responsibility to perform well and work hard. And that responsibility is not simply for ourselves, but it benefits all of society. And a very interesting book, a very sort of English-centric book, as you might imagine, being from the mid-19th century. Interestingly enough, though, one of the people who liked this book, appreciated it, Nakamura Masano, he translated Self-Help into Japanese. And there's the Japanese title there, Segeko Rishihan. And this was 1871, so about 12 years after Smiles published the book. It sold over 1 million copies in Japan, which is remarkable because in England it sold 250,000 copies. So extremely popular book, and it had a big influence in what's known as the Meiji period of Japan, when they opened up after several centuries of shogun rule. They opened up the country to trade and interaction with the rest of the world. They did have that period before the Meiji period in the 19th century where they were a very closed society. They wanted to be inwardly focused, and they were run by the shoguns and with the samurai supporting the shogun empire. But things changed in the 19th century for a lot of reasons. Admiral Perry from the US Navy going there is credited with that, but that may have been just a tipping point, because there were a lot of things going on in Japanese society that led to this change and this openness to what they would then consider modern ideas, and really integrating themselves with the rest of the world. This book obviously is extremely influential. And one of the people that read this book is who we're going to talk about next, Tsukichi. Tsukichi this is him as a young man. And so his father was a believer in the Nichiren Shu, so that Buddhist philosophy that I talked about earlier. And again, from that Hotoku thought process, that was really a life creed for Tsukichi's father. And so, Tsukichi was drawing on that for his formation of some of his ideas as a young person in a society that was going through a fairly tremendous change, right? From a very closed society where Tsukichi's ancestors were in this agrarian population and very closed in terms of social, being able to climb socially. And so now he's in this dynamic, changing society, and the Hotoku is still a traditional set of ideas that influenced him. He was also, though, very aggressive about wanting to learn. And so as a young person, and we're talking a teenager, he organized study meetings where they would read books and debate ideas and discuss issues and think about what that meant for the rest of their lives. And one of those books was Samuel Smiles' Self-Help, translated in Japanese. And so we had this Asian tradition of service. We also had these ideas from Smiles that talked about how people need to focus on purpose and service, and how they need to really, through perseverance and dedication, work towards this life of happiness. But these themes of service and purpose were really embedded and ingrained in the thinking of Tsukichi Toyoda. This is him as an older gentleman after creating what were known as the Toyota mill organizations. He invented looms for textile weaving. He had a tremendous textile business. This textile business was actually what funded the automobile business that his son later built up, with Tsukichi's original encouragement, although the car company was founded 5 years after Tsukichi's death. But when they founded the car company, they took Tsukichi Toyoda's tenets and memorialized them. And the very first one is, I think, key to this idea of service and contribution and purpose, which was to contribute to the development of the welfare of the country by working together, regardless of where you're working in the company, faithfully fulfill your duties, sort of in a Samuel Smiles type of focus. But you have a purpose here if you're part of our company, and you're contributing to the welfare of Japan, which at that time was looking to compete on the world stage. And probably a very exciting time for people. The focus here was on purpose. And when you look at what informed a lot of the lean practices, while Taiichi Ohno gets a lot of rightful credit for really growing those and scaling those, a lot of those practices really began with Tsukichi Toyoda. And it was extremely important that, in his view, that he was contributing to Japanese society. Well, that brings us to this fourth person, Ed. And Ed that we talk about is W. Edwards Deming. Understand his friends called him Ed, people that he worked with called him Ed. Edwards is actually his mother's maiden name, if you're curious, and the W stands for William. His father was also William, and Ed Deming also grew up in Cody, Wyoming. So Buffalo Bill was there as well. So you could speculate that, whether somebody was in the family or Ed himself didn't want to be another Bill or William, and went with his middle name, and Ed is his name. So a little interesting background there. But he was really service-oriented and purpose-oriented as well. And this is a quote from his book, The New Economics, that was published really at the time of his death. But here again, this is an important idea that that the purpose of an organization is for everybody to gain. So purpose is about serving communities. In this case, he named stockholders, employees, suppliers, customers, and the community, but all these stakeholders, over the long term. So again, this is an important idea. We talk about Deming and the Deming Circle with the Plan, Do, Study, Act. There are a lot of influences that fed into how Toyota was, being organized in the 50s. They were very purposeful in adopting some of Deming's ideas and integrating them with their own ideas. And this, I think, is also an important idea that comes from Deming too, that he understood that individuals had something important to contribute. And he saw in a lot of industry, particularly in American industry, that people's motivation could be deflated, that there sometimes was a lack of self-respect, a lack of curiosity. That is really it's natural for us to be curious. It's natural for us to want to learn. And there's this sort of societal conformity process, a socialization process that sometimes beats that out of us. And he felt it was very important that people be able to reclaim this. This is one of the key ideas that we're going to talk about today, in terms of how we connect our individual selves to our project and the purpose of that project. So of course that brings us to you. So I'm going to introduce a few purpose connection practices that we've developed. I've developed with some colleagues over the years and tested them and worked with projects to do so. And we're going to give you a chance, if you'd like, to play with them. These practices could be done over a lunch break. They could also be done over a day or 2 half days as well. And they're best done with the team, although certainly you can do them individually, as some of you may do today. But the purpose connection practices are these. It's about starting with the personal strength discovery. So that's really connecting to what that last slide of on Deming was talking about, that we have personal strengths that we've oftentimes learned to hide, because those individual characteristics of us, we don't want to sometimes stand out. We've been told not to stand out in many ways. And yet the ways we stand out are really ways that we demonstrate our personal strengths. We'll talk a little bit about that. And it's important on a project team to understand that together, when we combine these strengths, we create something unique. And we're creating what some people call a shared identity. From there, we'll move to talking about really how do you have a conversation where you align on a purpose. And this is different than a broader mission statement. Mission statements are good, and oftentimes owner organizations will have mission statements for the project. But in terms of a purpose alignment, we're really talking about what's personally meaningful for the people on your team. Why is this project personally meaningful? Of course, it normally would align with the mission of the statement, but there's a lot of ways that people really internalize the value of the project and the work they're doing. And it's important to articulate that. And so that moves into, not only what our purpose is, but what are the values that we as a team share in that purpose. We'll start with personal strength discovery. There are a lot of sources for these ideas, and understanding that this is an important idea. This one from the statement from Peter Block's book, Community Structure and Belonging, is important. And he uses the word gifts to talk about strengths. That's fine. Some people use the term core identity in terms of this is who we really are on the inside. So you can think of them as gifts, or you can think about strength, but these are the unique qualities that you bring to a project or an organization. So we need to understand what those are and talk about them. You may be a strong estimator, you may be a wonderful designer as an architect, you may be a great superintendent and have some really high technical skills. But what's important to your project are some of those unique qualities that you bring to it. And that's what it's helpful to explore. And it's very helpful to explore in a team situation, because it really helps people appreciate who you are as an individual. It also gives you the confidence that who you are really contributes to the rest of the team. As you hear people feedback and validate that these qualities, these strengths that you have are important. So these are some examples from this work of different strengths, and you can see these aren't not technical skills. These are ways of connecting with other people and helping a team move forward. And we've used in the past these models to help people think through that. I'll go through some other strategies. There's different ways of doing that. I particularly like this one because this was one of the senior managers on a project for an owner's representative group, and one of his key qualities was that he could do the dirty work. He was willing to do things that just were sort of mundane. People didn't like it because it was boring stuff, but he would work through that. So we all bring those kinds of different qualities and strengths to a project, and it's worth taking some time to explore those. Let's go through a couple of different exercises. One somewhat more easy really to do and to have a good fun conversation about is superhero qualities. So, what is it about, first of all, what superhero appeals to you? Some people may find it easy to relate to Batman or let's just say Wonder Woman. It might really be a villain too, if you think about sort of the Marvel cast of characters. What qualities or strengths that those characters have that appeal to you? So not the superpower. It's great that Superman can fly and have X-ray vision, but what are the human qualities? So when you think about those stories, the writers and the storytellers aren't just creating people with unusual strengths or capabilities. They're also creating characters that need to relate to the people that are reading or watching the movie or the show. So what kinds of qualities are you drawn to? Because oftentimes those kinds of qualities may reflect things that are in you that you appreciate at a subconscious level about yourself, or that you, because you admire them in others and see them in others, that those particular gifts are in you. So this is one particular exercise that you can do, and we'll in a few minutes we'll actually go through that and run through that. Another one that takes a little bit longer, that's a lot of fun, is but starts to use the capability, starts to use other materials to help draw out from your sort of subconscious and lower conscious thinking how you help other groups, what strengths you bring to it. So stranded is you gather some art materials, some of those are listed, anything that's sort of fun and uses your hands. And this is very helpful because there is this hand-mind connection that lets you drop into a deeper level of thinking as you work through. And so you play with the materials that you chose, and you play with modeling or drawing or creating in some way that suggests how you would help a group of people that you're with if you are all stranded on an island. And the setup has to include with the premise, there's food, there's sources of food, there's sources of shelter. You're not in a struggle for survival. Everything you need to survive is there and available to you. This is really about until you're rescued, how do you help the group cope with this type of situation? And it's a lot of fun to explore with a group of people and see what you come up with. You use Lego bricks. There is a practice called Lego Serious Play, that is a lot of fun. And if you have more time, this can be a good way of sort of starting to develop models and thinking abstractly how these models reflect qualities that you have. And so if you've worked with me and a colleague, Joanna Lee, on this, you know we go through building a tower just to sort of set up the mechanics of understanding how to start to think metaphorically and move from what a Lego brick is to you know, what your strengths are. So these are sort of the steps. And like this intermediate question about building a model of someone who's influenced you, that starts to get to you to think about how a model might reflect something in you, but that's also strength-based. So those steps are very helpful. So with that, I'm going to invite you to go ahead and do a quick superhero reflection. And really, if you would, you obviously don't have to, but if some of you would be very willing to throw those into the question box, you know, Eileen or I will read some of those out for people, because I think it's a pretty interesting exercise. So again, so think about a favorite superhero and think about what qualities that are human qualities that that appeal to you. And you know, I think in the context of, you know, characters, you know, if it's not a superhero, if it's a character from a story that you really like, a show that you like, a movie that you appreciated, don't limit yourself to the Marvel comic superhero world. If there's some other media, storytelling media that is appealing to you and a character from that story, use that. That's fine.
Do you want them to write what character they're thinking of, or no?
They can or they can't, but really sort of what strength do you have? So is it, I'm going to pick one, you know, and again, people don't have to agree with your perception of that character. But if I said, you know, Superman always tells the truth, even when it's may not help him. That truthfulness is important to me. You don't worry that someone else interprets that different or doesn't think that that's necessarily true about the character.
Well, we had someone writing compassion,
Great.
willingness and courage to engage in conflict, difficult discussions or situations, the one that jumps in front of the bus to protect the team, and truth. Let's see, personal strengths or communication and listening to feedback. Let's see, organizer and builder of peoples and systems. Let's see, integrity, getting biblical. Let's see, they use biblical passages, saying that Jesus is the superhero. Throw that out there here. Truth before harmony, sensing tensions in groups. Let's see. And the character is Roy Kent. He is here, there, everywhere, and truly cares about his team. Then there's loyalty, commitment, and servant leadership. And I think we're going to pause right there. We don't have a lot more coming in, so.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, everybody. So this is, it's great to hear that. And those are great examples of the types of strengths and gifts that we're talking about. And having that conversation and that inner reflection with other members of your team is a way of building that relationship with other people in the team. My experience is I've never seen any person that was somehow, as you say, ridiculed or diminished or criticized for bringing out any strength that they had. It starts to set an environment where people understand each other better and understand how they can support each other and help each other. So those are great examples. So I appreciate everybody contributing those. Thank you. So with that, we'll move to this next practice of creating a shared identity. This is really thinking about who are we together. Now the purpose of this is to build on the personal gifts, the personal strengths work that you did, and understanding how together you create a really a single unit, an organization. And so I'll step back a little bit when I say this. Really, normally doing this kind of shared identity work with groups that might range from 6 to as many as perhaps 20, 24 people. But I would say a sweet spot is, a working team that works together frequently. And so even on a large project, that might be anywhere from, say, 6 to 15 people. For example, in one project we worked with, it was primarily a core group of 6 people. On another project, it was all the work cluster leads that were together. So there were about 12 people in that group. So the sizes can range, and we've done a leadership team with as many as a couple dozen people. But the point in communicating that, this is not, if you have 70 or 80 people on a very large design project, or you're not going to do the shared leadership with them. You probably could easily, well, I know you easily could break into groups. So for example, the construction model of this would be, you would have foremen working with the superintendent, project manager, could do this kind of work. But then the foreman, if they chose to, could do this with their crews. Again, you could do a long workshop with this, but you could do this over a few lunch sessions as well, just as easily. And you'll see when we get to the practice of creating a shared impact statement, why it helps to actually have these smaller teams focus on one that represents them, and why it's fine that these are different. But this idea of creating a shared, basically identity, is you're really creating an understanding of how you work together and how the different strengths fit. And part of this is about creating trust and really establishing trust. So I don't know that there's a lot of debate that it's important. I still think it's helpful to see statistics like this. And the Edelman Trust Barometer is a way of measuring how much people do in an organization trust each other. And I believe there's not a lot of debate that that's an important aspect of solid teamwork. So, and where productivity is wonderful, but think about this: having more energy at work, having less stress, feeling more engaged and more satisfied, avoiding the effects of burnout. So this creating a team that you feel that you has your back is this next step in terms of really talking about purpose. And note, we really haven't talked about purpose yet. We're getting there. But we're first drawing on your individual strengths and then putting them together in the sense of a group. And so we're creating a group where there's this, I'm using the term shared leadership. Jim Benson, he has a book called Collaboration Equation that's I would also recommend. He uses the term distributed leadership. But it's really important that we think about leadership in a different light. Oftentimes we think about leadership as there's a person in charge and they're telling others what to do. Now, in the lean world, we recognize that we've broken away from this. I think we need to be really deliberate, though, when we think about our shared identity, that at any one point in time, we may need a strength that one of the others has, and they need to step forward and lead. So someone talked about compassion, that you don't necessarily hear of that as a project management skill. And yet you can imagine when there's a certain problem or roadblock or frustration or a need to go back and correct something, a major mistake. The team having some compassion on itself is actually very important, right? If you beat yourself up, then you start to create these mental roadblocks about moving forward. And someone being able to take the lead and say, look, okay, we had a problem, but we need to respect ourselves, and we need to have compassion on ourselves as humans, and recognize that humans make mistakes, and come on everybody, let's move forward. So it doesn't matter if that person with that strength of compassion is someone who's been working in the industry 35 years or someone who is just out of school. That person needs to really step forward in that environment and say, we can't beat ourselves up. We need to understand that we're human. We need to forgive the mistake and let's just move forward. That's the leadership that we're talking about in terms of shared leadership. So I hope that's helpful. But in charge of really creating this vision of a shared identity, when you think about your personal strengths, you may come up with several. It's not unusual. And think about the one or maybe two that really support your project team, because some of their personal strengths may be more applicable in a social group or your family at home. But think about the one that is supporting your team and find a way to create relationships between the different strengths and then create a story. If you're writing the strengths up on a whiteboard, then start to craft the story about how they relate to each other and how those different strengths support the team. And you don't have to, in fact, I wouldn't even recommend saying, Joe brings compassion to the project and then connect that to somebody else's strengths. It's more about we're compassionate as a group. We have compassion because you know the person in the group and the people in the group that can support that. But then create this story about that expresses the team strength as really a construction of all the strengths together. So just to help you visualize this, again, you could do this with writing the story out on the up on a wall. But to visualize this, you can see that we created a model in this case using the Lego bricks. And so the Lego bricks, each part of those, subsection of that represents somebody's strength that they're contributing to the project. And the teams literally create they decide how they want to connect those bricks visually and on a Lego plate and draw connections between those strengths. And then they create a story that helps them remember what those are. And you can do this on a whiteboard, a number of different ways. But create that story. And when we do it in a group, we have everybody repeat and run through the story. Sure, everybody tells it a little bit differently. What's important is just it's a setting that allows everybody to appreciate who they are as a group, and that's what's important about that exercise. So again, this is from a core group, and I'm not even sure I remember. I'm sure they do what these strengths all are, but you can see how they just arranged a model to show what these strengths were for them. Here's another example for you as well. And here's the person in the photo is telling the story while other people on the team are watching. And so you're literally, in this case, pointing at the model. If you're writing the story out, and not necessarily a narrative on the whiteboard, but just how you arrange the words. And just go through and tell the story pointing at the words as they come up. It's really a helpful way of thinking about who the team is together. So this is an example of the story. This is from a stranded exercise. So you can see different people had different strengths, and they arranged this on a map, if you will, so that they could tell a story about who they are together. Next exercise, you may be watching as individuals, but you still think about, what are the signs that you're connected to members of your team? So what's telling you that you have a real connection? And hopefully you've all been part of projects where you really felt people got along, you could trust them, they had your back. But what were the things that told you that? And you have to give you a minute or so to put those in, and then when Eileen's ready, it'd be great to hear what you said.
I have to say there's one thing that came into the questions box when you were talking about teams and getting together a while ago, and it's team. Together, everyone accomplishes more. And I hadn't thought about it like that, and I wanted to read that out because I thought it was pretty cool.
I haven't heard that acronym either, but yeah, it's very applicable. It's true. It's I mean, that's the history of human progress. It's a lot of times the individual gets credit, Thomas Edison, for inventing things, but there are a whole lot of people that were involved in the invention of the light bulb story that you don't necessarily hear about. So it is about humans coming together and working together.
All right, let's go ahead and get some answers in the questions box. What are signs that you are connected to the members of your working teams? So, Tom, what have you heard from this before? What are some of the things that people have said?
There's a feeling that when they make a mistake, people are going to say, hey, how can I help you? Or if they're behind in their work. There's a lot of talk on, I would say, project teams on this idea of how do we hold people accountable for their work. And when you have this, this team identity that's solid, the conversation shifts to, we want everybody to have their work visible, to have their commitments visible. But the response, and I saw this with an architectural design team. They had their commitments down, and they were doing the last planner system and making weekly work plans. And we talk about those being commitments. And one of the architects named Dave was talking about how he was behind in his commitment to deliver something. And the response from his team was, Dave, I see you're behind. How can we help you? So, that, I think, there are variations of that, but that idea that, your success is a shared success, and the challenges other people are having is a shared challenge. And that sort of thinking almost as one mind and one organism, if that's a metaphor that's useful.
Well, we do have some of that in here, but I want to read some of the others here. We have someone that said laugh together, understanding how the team's strengths and weaknesses link together, a sense of being on the same page when applicable, becomes we, not me. People reach out to get advice, discuss a problem, and brainstorm solutions. Not rescuing, but supporting and trusting. A sense of looking out for the group's interests more than an individual's interess. And if there are any errors, you own up to the errors themselves. There is only good tension and an appropriate resolution of any quote unquote problems.
Great.
And that's what we're gonna,
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. That's those are all great, and those are good. And I appreciate that we're recording this, so some of those are new. So I appreciate everybody's participation. That's wonderful. We'll shift now to this practice of the purpose alignment conversation. This is where we really get into defining what the purpose of the team is. And this is not something that's imposed on the team, and there have been some very different ideas that are all useful and relevant and helpful to teams. So I'll also show some examples of it. But if this one was an example that's imposed, so it's not something that people came up with, but it also shows the power of being very clear about purpose. So a lot of people, particularly if you were at the 2015 LCI Congress, you got to hear Paul O'Neill speak. But he did something really tremendous at his tenure at the Alcoa company. He focused, his purpose really was focused on safety, right? It's an extremely dangerous industry in terms of ways that people could get hurt. And a lot of people prior to his tenure as CEO were hurt. And he made this the singular focus. Now, I think understanding who he was, a large part of that was just a sincere desire to not see people hurt at work. I think there was also a really deep understanding that if he wanted to align the company in being a stronger company, he had to focus on something that mattered to the people that were working in their factories, in their facilities. And for them, making the quarterly numbers wasn't important, right? Making acquisitions, growing the company, not something that emotionally resonates with them. And that's the important part of this, is like, what is something that emotionally resonates with you and gets you excited about what you're doing? Picking safety and then demonstrating that he was serious about it. And there's some great stories that demonstrate that. That got people in the company understanding and excited about what they could accomplish together, which was to create a place that they felt that they knew that they would be able to leave work in the same health and condition that they started. Now, I showed some here. We have lost days that was tremendous gain during his tenure, but there's also obviously the economic results that come out of that were tremendous. You can see in the graphs, the market value of the company grew extremely, the net income grew. But this was from a singular focus on how do we become a safe organization. Because the outcomes of that, I mean, we created more effective processes. I mean, to be safe, you ended up also being more efficient. A lot of the things that were causing safety problems were also productivity issues. And so that focus on safety was a purpose that people could emotionally invest in. A standard CEO might have said, we're going to grow the company 50%. We're going to increase our margins from 20% to 25%. And nobody in a facility would care about that. But they could care about their own safety and the safety of their colleagues. So to start out this process, just collect ideas. And I'll point out, ideally, we're looking at aspirational ideas. Sometimes people will fall into, well, our purpose is to meet the budget. Our purpose is to get this project to open by a certain date. Those are important things. In this exercise, we're looking for things that really you can emotionally connect with again. So what are the aspirational ideas that you have for it? And what's really good when you get a group of, whether it's 6 or 20 people together, just spend a few minutes, maybe 5 or 10 minutes, writing down the ideas that you have on sticky notes. And then you start to, person at a time, post them up there, and start to arrange them into affinity groups, or so a lot of people are going to have a lot of ideas that are very similar, and so if it's around supporting other people on the team, there might be different ways of phrasing that. So you go ahead and arrange the sticky notes so you can start to see some common themes visually up on the wall, and that prompts a conversation. And so this, again, this is just another example I'm showing of how people, created the sticky notes and wrote them up there. And then to zoom in on one here, as a the purpose they thought as leaders, and this came from a group of cluster leads. So as leaders, you can see championing the culture, create cohesion on the project. One person you can see even draw an image to capture their idea. So don't limit yourself to words if an image helps you communicate a concept better at this stage. So these are all put together because they're all similar. If you zoomed out on that, you'd see some different ideas. But this is this brainstorming is where you start. And then you craft a statement. And this is, you're going to write and rewrite this statement a few times. So here you see one of the members of the group is starting to write down. People are throwing out ideas. He may be on his 3rd or 4th draft at that point when he's writing this out there. But write and rewrite this. Make sure that statement is personally meaningful for everyone. Ideally, you've come off this conversation about thinking about your strengths, thinking about what's important to you. And part of the statement is going to describe the impact is beneficial to a specific community. So again, you're tapping into that part of really our brains, and there's a lot of research that supports this. We are not the what's in it for me species that a lot of popular literature makes us out to be. If you wire up our brains to an fMRI scanner, you'll see that the pleasure centers of our brain light up when we are involved in altruistic acts, when we're in acts of service. So they didn't have fMRI scans when Buddha was teaching, when Samuel Smiles was writing, but we still have this idea that service and to others is an important aspect of humanity. So what people are you benefiting through your purpose? That's part of what you're writing out here as well. So I'll give you a few examples, and this is one. And you can see the community, they're worried about, I mean, they're focused on, I shouldn't say worried about, they're focused on, this is the greater team that they're supporting. So yes, this project happened to be a healthcare project, and yes, so there's another community, those patients, the caregivers that'll be benefiting from the project. But because they were focused as a group of leaders that leading the entire design effort, this is where they focused their statement on, and that was the purpose of their group working together. So, again, this is what was meaningful to them. This wasn't prescribed. This is what they came up with. So it's important that you're not trying to fit a mold or trying to do something that sounds good to others, but you're trying to do something that's important to your group of people. This is for a government project, and you can see the photograph shows you the way one of the drafts, the final draft that they wrote out. They wrote out several of these drafts, and in this case, they even signed them. Just to have those signatures on there that this is something that they together came up with. And this is one of the larger groups that we did this with. Another example here. In this case, this is another leadership group for a healthcare project. In this case, they chose to name as the community they're benefiting the patients and caregivers. And for me, I thought that was powerful that they specified a number that they're, at any given time, they're impacting the lives of 166 families. So that made it personal for them, and you can sense why it did. This is another statement. A lot of these are healthcare, just by virtue of the types of projects that are often doing, but not always. This is an example that actually came from we call them user groups, right, in design. But this is administrative and technical staff for a hospital, and they were talking about who they are and what's important to them as well. This was a large group again, and we don't often have it. I love these kinds of spaces where you only have windows, so the sticky notes go up on the windows and you work on the windows, but those are fun spaces to work in. This is for a manufacturing facility, and they were able to connect, in this case, the importance of what they were doing to facilitate the construction of that facility, and why that product was important for them to support making. And use these statements. So, in this last case, the statement was on the meeting minutes. And this is, I've seen statements used on agendas and so forth, and posters made. So, don't make the statement and then put it away in a drawer somewhere. Keep referring to it. Keep thinking of it. And so, in that idea of purpose alignment, think about the projects, whether you've had this kind of conversation or not. Maybe if we could just get a quick list of communities that have been benefited by the work that you've done.
All right, go ahead and put those into the questions box. There was another acronym that was written in that I want to bring to everybody's attention, and it is COWS, COWS, and it is the Cards on Wall system. As you were talking about brainstorming and putting the Post-it notes up and the stickies up, I thought that would be interesting to share with everyone.
Yeah, thank you.
So we have a couple of statements that I wanted to get your opinion on while people are writing this into the questions box here. I have the impact statement plus alignment statement equals the charter or mission and vision. What are your thoughts on that?
I'll make sure I understand that. So is it, I mean, contrasting, and I sometimes will use alignment statement, but really impact statement is the term I'm using. And if the question is, how does that contrast with sort of a mission statement? I think mission statements tend to be more organizational and broader. They're important, and your purpose, your purpose alignment or your meaningful impact statement, whichever term you choose to use, ideally really aligns with that, right? You're supporting that organization or that project, and so it has that broader mission statement. Those mission statements, because they're intended to speak to a broader community, do tend to be, I won't say generic, but they tend to be and want to encompass less specific ideas, because again, they're talking about the project itself. With your impact statement, you could be much more specific. So like the group of cluster group leads, they're there to help the team. They were designers and builders as an integrated team. They were there to help, and owner with them, right? They were to help the people on those teams do a great job of designing that building. So that's very specific. So if that healthcare system was to go out to their donors and supporters and say, we've got a wonderful group of cluster group leads that are helping those professionals design a great building, that's good information, but people want to hear what the mission is. So I hope that helps address that.
Okay, we did have someone that wrote in an answer to your question. Tiny villages for homeless communities through community councils.
Yeah. There are plenty of, I mean, think about the work we do. We design and create the built environment, which is a part of nearly everyone's life on this planet. There are perhaps exceptions to that, but that's extremely important. It creates that ability for people to do the things that they want to do and live the life that they want to live. We have one of the more important jobs. I mean, other jobs are also important, but ours is not secondary. It's a very important role that we play. And I think it helps to reflect on that what we're doing is valuable, because some of the work is hard. And then when we layer on that, we want to be very focused on these lean practices. There's some rigor and discipline to that. The payoff is there, because that payoff is oftentimes a future benefit. It's often easy to discount because of that dynamic of really focused on the here and now. So why are we going through and engaging these lean practices and the rigor that's involved? It really is important to keep in mind that we're serving someone with this, and we're happy about that, and we're excited about that. But that can't be defined for you. That's really something that you need to participate in articulating what that purpose is. Or let's put it this, it could be defined for you. You could say, that's great, I accept it and buy into it. It's helpful though when you can be a person that contributes to understanding that. And again, there may be nested impact statements, right? You could create one for the entire project, but then come down and create one for the crew that is doing the electrical work and constructing the building. And theirs may be very different, while still aligned and really contributed to that broader mission. Theirs could be very specific for whatever reason. I mean, because that would be up to them to create, to why are they emotionally engaged in the success of that project? So this final step is about values articulation. And again, it comes out of understanding who we are as a team, what's important to the team, and then how as a team, what are we drawing upon to realize that purpose that we're going through. And so this in some ways really comes out of that that creation or that development of the meaningful impact statement. And so oftentimes we just use the word through. We're achieving this purpose and serving this community through these ideas. And so here's an example from a group. And I'll just move through some of these somewhat quickly. But you can see this in this example, it was just listed on a whiteboard coming out of that conversation of what is our purpose. Yeah, it looks nice when you type it out, but you know, when you're working as a group, use whatever tools are available. So this last question, you know, I'd like to hear some values or ways of relating to other people in the project that you've observed that you know, are really contributed or supported the project.
All right, go ahead and write those into the questions box. We'd love to get some answers and read those out. A comment came in that says values articulation, yes, with end user requirements.
Yeah, so yeah, this work is so I'll just go up to this doesn't necessarily address end user requirements, right? This is really about who we are as a group and what qualities that we are bringing to serve this project. So end user requirements, you may articulate those in conditions of satisfaction. In my experience, those tend to be more about the results of the project that are required to satisfy the needs. So I would say this development of a shared impact statement and articulating the values complements the development of a conditions of satisfaction process, and you know, certainly does not replace it at all. I would say it complements it, and I would say the end user requirements is something that fits more in that conditions of satisfaction bucket, if you will. So this is a complementary practice.
So we have someone that wrote in that said active listening and understanding and empathy.
Yeah.
And that's all we have right now.
That's great. So how can you apply this tomorrow? So I'm just to have a little bit of fun with this. I organized this using a 5S process. But if we think about you know, sorting as one, that's where the personal strength discovery is. It's about, you know, let's strip away what people, you know, think we should be in terms of people, you know, think of the ways that we should conform, and let's think about how as individuals, you know, what characteristics, what qualities, what strengths and gifts do we bring to this project. And so that's just really the first part. And this is a wonderful conversation to have with the team. Again, you could do a formal workshop, you could do this over lunch. If you can't do it with the team, at least do it with yourself. Have some reflection. And this is something, you know, you do once a quarter, once a year, but really think about what is it that I bring to the people that I work with, and how am I contributing beyond your technical skills. This idea of straightening, I've likened this creating a shared identity to that, because you're really now organizing everybody's strengths on the project, and how are you connecting them, how are you understanding them as a single group, and you know, to a certain degree, you know, how and why are you coming together, and then this purpose alignment conversation is where you really sort of polish, you know, this idea of what your shared identity is about. You're really you know, you're looking at, you know, okay, I know what my strengths are, I know how our strengths are together, but now, you know, how do we really polish that and make that into a statement that makes us really happy and thrilled about the work and how we're contributing to others. And in a certain way, standardize, you know, values articulation is standardizing standardizing the qualities that we bring to the project, the things that we value, and being clear about that. And then there's this whole process of really sustaining. So, how do you incorporate team members? How do you continue to work with the team? How do you talk about a project purpose? But a lot of that is really about celebrating, the purpose that you have, being excited about it, and by celebrating, I have an image of a party there, right? So there are different ways of celebrating. There are different ways of just acknowledging on a regular basis why your project is important. An example I can give you from roughly a month ago, someone on the construction management team, someone who actually doesn't participate in a lot of the daily huddles, he's one of the project managers, came to a huddle and gave a great conversation about the importance of that project and what they're doing for that community and really that region, and why this project benefits so many people, and encouraging them to not only talk about that and think about that on the project, but let their families know that they're part of something important. So that's a way of celebrating what you're doing, thinking about that. Our work is hard. Sometimes we're working with challenges that are really tough, and oftentimes we're tempted to take some shortcuts and put some of the lean practices aside and just get stuff done. We know that can oftentimes will lead to problems later on, and we need to be diligent and rigorous in how we apply our lean practices, and finding ways to celebrate what you're doing and being, keeping yourself engaged and excited in the project is a way to do that. So keep connecting and committing to people on your team, what you're going to do, what your purpose is, and that's a way of staying engaged. I'm sending I know Eileen will send out the deck, so there's some resources in here. I won't read them, but just some quick background on Samuel Smile, Sakichi Toyoda, and then the Hotoku thought as well. And then some of the resources that I drew upon for this as well that you may find interesting. The first 3 of these are available online. The last one, that book by John Willis on Ed Deming, is a wonderful book. It's a great audio book as well. So you'd have to buy that though as well. So that's a presentation. I'm looking forward to any questions or comments that people would like to make.
Awesome. Thank you, Tom. So put any questions that you have into the questions box at the bottom of the control panel. And now we're opening it for the plus delta. Again, those of you who are not familiar with the term, pluses are things you thought added value to the presentation, and deltas are things you think we should change to add more value to the presentation. We've mentioned continuous improvement a couple times, PDCA, plan, do, check, adjust, plan, do, check, act, whichever way you're more comfortable with. And we want to make sure our webinars are exactly what it is you'd like to hear about. So go ahead and put all that into the questions box. Tom, I actually have a question for you.
Great.
I'm going to put you on the spot. We've gone through the webinar. We've listened to all you've had to say. There was a lot to take in. I'm really excited about what you had to say. If everyone was going to take this back to their company and say, this is why I think this is important, this is what I think we should do, what's the one thing that people would get out of this webinar and take it back and say, this is it, this is the big idea?
The big idea is we need to articulate for our group, what it is that we're doing that's important and helpful to others. So what is that statement of a purpose that we feel emotionally invested in? I think the personal strengths reflection, the shared identity, those build up to that. But really, the big idea is it's really important to understand why we're excited about our work. A lot of times people get a little jaded and feel that they're just sort of putting in the time. And that's easy to do, right? And if you want to really perform at a high level, you need to be excited about what it is you're doing and understanding how you are really helping a whole group of other people and making a difference in others' lives, it turns out really is a way of motivating us and having us excited about the work that we're doing. So that's it's a long way of saying the big idea is to understand how we work together serves other people.
You know, going along with that, we've had a couple pluses come in about this particular subject. So I'm going to ask you to expand a little more since we have some time. Um, there's a couple people that really said they enjoyed the ideas on team engagement and building team character specifically. So let's talk about team character for a little bit. Um, building that character, what are your thoughts on how to do that? Different references, resources. How would you tell a team
Yeah.
to do that?
Yeah, I want to make sure I understand the question in terms of, is it team characters at the shared identity that I talked about, or is it relating to? Because when I talked about drawing upon characters from stories, that was more about the individual, so not a team character. So maybe I need to clarify that. As an individual, what characters and what qualities those characters have sort of reflect something that's appealing to me and probably a part of me. That idea of a team, I guess that shared identity, you could use the word character for that, but it's almost if we were to create this sort of superhuman person that had the best of all of us, what is it that person is capable of doing? And again, these aren't technical skills. These are, what can, as that superhuman person, what do we bring to achieving a stellar project together? And really, that conversation is more about who are we together, not what do we bring. So I backtrack a little bit, but just it's recognizing who we are together.
The clarification came in. It's team engagement. Building team character was the shared identity.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think it's really about our team has these qualities, and this is what the storytelling is about. We we support each other with. I'm trying to think through some of the stories that we've had with compassion. We're very open to new ideas and understanding how they might help people. When we get into a situation where there's a lot of work, we have the ability to really go in and work on the details and do the things that other teams wouldn't do. I'm sort of spitballing here a little bit, but the idea is to take all these individual qualities. I do have, and I could post some videos of that would actually be helpful for people, and maybe give you a link, Eileen, to that if people wanted to see that, because that would help people, I think, more than me trying to explain it, is actually just listen to some people that participate this describe those shared identity qualities.
That sounds great. If you'd like to give me that link, I will send it out in the email that I send to all the registrants with the slide deck and the recording. So whenever you can get that to me, that would be great.
Okay.
I'd appreciate that. I had a question and now it's gone, and I apologize, everyone. I'm normally not this flaky. We are out of questions at the moment. Again, plus Delta's questions, please put them in the questions box. Do you have some final thoughts about everything that you've said? And maybe that will refresh the question in my mind that I was going to ask, because I was really jonesing for the answer to that question.
Yeah, I think one important thought is even if you start with, and we've done some larger workshops with this, even if you start with a major workshop, should not be a one and done exercise. It's a conversation that you should revisit from time to time. One, the actual statement you create, post that. We've had teams put posters together, include the statements on agendas and meeting minutes and so forth. But feel free. I mean, if after a few months you feel that you want to shift what's meaningful to you, do that again. And again, it doesn't have to be a day-long workshop. This could be over a lunch or 2 lunches that you do this. So find a way that works for your team, and just modify the process that I talked about that fits or the needs of the people that you're working with, the time you have available, and so forth.
I remembered my question. As soon as you started to tell your final thoughts, I'm like, I remember my question. You mentioned a lot of playing to the strengths of individuals and the teams. I know that there are a lot of ways like strengths finders and core clarity and all of that. But how do you think or recommend that people should find those? Like there are lots of assessments now. LCI even has some assessments for individuals, organizations, and teams. Or how would you recommend that people find those strengths?
Well, the process that we're talking about is more reflective
Hmm.
and internal. That doesn't argue against using those strength finders or some of the other DISC analysis, for example. If you want to explore who you are, there's a lot of different those tools. The step that we're recommending here helps personalize it a bit and lets you be more reflective. Those strength finders and those DISC profiles and related tools, they're helpful as ways of understanding some sort of group characteristics of where people might fall on different types of scales. So I don't discourage those. But we're looking for something that's more personal because, again, we're creating and articulating a purpose or impact statement that's meaningful to the people in that group. And so, being a little bit more reflective about, what's personal to you, what you bring as an individual, as opposed to what category you might fall in, serves the purpose of thinking about why the work you're doing is more important to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the clarification there. Well, we don't have any more questions or plus deltas, so we're going to give you a little bit of time back in your day. Elsie, I would like to thank Tom for presenting and all of you for attending the webinar today. We wish you the best of the rest of your day and a fantastic weekend. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Bye.